Today's the 22nd of June 2012 and I'm in Berlin, and I've just driven over from Paris. Driven over from Paris as one does. Stopping along the way at Luxembourg and also at Kassel. And the reason why I went to Kassel, of course, is that Kassel 2012 is one of the rare times that the Documenta exhibition is on. And in fact, this was Documenta 13. Documenta, as you may know, happens every 5 years. It's a major art exhibition. This one is artistically directed by Caroline Christoph Bacaviev, who in fact I met a few years ago actually when I was working at Arts New South Wales, and she was directing the Biennale in Sydney at that particular time. She's also written a lot on, well, she hasn't written a lot, but she has written an essay on Sean Gladwell, which I have referred to in my book on Sean, which is due out on Schwartz City in February 2013. Anyway, I thought I would record this and just get down a few of my ideas that have been bouncing around in my head since visiting Documenta the other day. Understanding that I was only actually there for a day, it seems, going through the book, I actually think that we managed to see probably around about a third of the artists in the exhibition. Now, the exhibition is primarily at Kassel in Germany, but it's also at Kassel, and I also think somewhere in Canada, and there's a few different venues throughout the world. Anyway, the main one, of course, is the one in Kassel. So I got to see probably around about a third of the exhibition. In Berlin, hey. But the really unfortunate thing about it was that unlike today in Berlin, where it's probably around about sort of 22, 23 degrees and it's very sunny, we've had the shittiest possible weather in Europe over the last 2 weeks. It's pissed down most of the time that I've been here, and in fact the day that I was in Kassel was no different. It's really, really heavily rained. So there's a lot of the outside works, the outdoor works, which are distributed throughout the gardens in Kassel, where they were just not accessible. It was just way too wet. But yeah, anyway, so I did get to see, I think, a significant portion of the work, and some of the more interesting things were, there was a section of the exhibition curated by Caroline Christoph Bacaviev, who had curated part of an exhibition that was in the dome part of the Friedrichianum, and that was quite interesting. It was actually a Lee Miller and Man Ray exhibition, and it was primarily based around the photographs that Lee Miller had taken, I think in Berlin, at the very end of the Second World War, in Hitler's bathroom, which was very interesting to see these photographs, and also to see Lee Miller, who is often pictured looking quite glamorous, with essentially war clothing on. Very much reminded me of what I'd been writing about recently, released last year, with the book on Sean Gladwell being an official war artist for Australia. I'm not even sure the reasons at this point why she was actually over there at that particular time, but she seemed to be sort of somehow embedded with the troops that were in Berlin in 1945. So that was a very interesting part of the exhibition, but it seemed to me that you know, it's in a room with other things such as Giorgio Morandi paintings, and also 4,500-year-old figurines, three-dimensional ceramic figurines, and it seemed to me that the connections were not necessarily obvious, and also there were in some places, such as the New Gallery, obvious connections between the works in that particular gallery that were to do with politics, for instance. Now, right across the different venues there were a number of different themes, and right across the various themes there were so many themes that there were just so many ideas that seemed to have little kind of overlap or synergy. Yeah, so there seemed to be lots of ideas and no primary sort of overarching theme. And this is a problem that I have a lot with art festivals anyway, is this idea that you know, what are you meant to do with this list of hundreds of artists, often hundreds of artists in these biennales and things like Documenta, and you know, what you know, are you meant as a curator to be making some overarching curatorial statement? And if so, I think there's a kind of a pressure for that statement to be something profound, you know, something that sort of looks for something overarching and almost grand statement, grand narrative about what is happening. And you know, is there room for that anymore? Whilst having said that, overall there weren't, the thing that really struck me is that there weren't any grand statements visually. I know in the past, in '92 for instance, that Jeff Koons' Puppy was exhibited for the first time not in one of the main venues but in a Schloss in a castle at Kassel, and it was quite an amazing visual statement at that time. And other works that have been installed in other years have made similar kind of big visual statements, but there was nothing like this in Documenta 13. Nothing that really made a big sort of public. Now, I'm not saying that there needs to be a spectacular, it needs to be a spectacle, it needs to be a spectacular artwork, but I think one of the things that was kind of lacking about this festival of art is that it really wasn't, you didn't get much of a sense of it actually being a festival. It wasn't very festive. There was a lot of joyless contemporary art devotees who were assembled in the various venues and later in the evening in the bars around Kassel. But there really wasn't a sense of there being much joy around it, which is not new to me as someone who has dipped in and out of the contemporary art world over the years. But there was that very sort of serious, po-faced attitude that I often find in the contemporary art world. But also I think what that does is reinforce a larger thing, a larger realization that I had in Kassel, which is this idea that something like Documenta, similarly with something like the Venice Biennale or the Sydney, not so much the Sydney one, but you know, those kinds of big international events, that there is this idea that I think it's almost like we, the art-going public, tend to be seen as, you know, paying homage. It's almost like, you know, Kassel is Mecca, and we're paying homage to this place in, you know, this sort of centre of art. I think he's wondering if I need moving through. Get him next time. Yeah, so it is a bit like this kind of temple of art sort of attitude that you know, we're meant to sort of go and pay homage, do this pilgrimage every 5 years to this what is otherwise a quite unspectacular town in the west of Germany. It's very much off the beaten track. It's kind of between sort of Bonn and Frankfurt. It's on, you know, it's on the main sort of autobahn, but it is a very small town. It's quite an interesting town in some respects. It was basically 90% destroyed in the Second World War by British bombing. And it is also the place where the, interestingly, I didn't realise, where the Brothers Grimm actually came from. And there was a museum there, which was in fact one of the venues for Documenta, which was the Brothers Grimm Museum. And found out some interesting things, that Jacob Grimm was in fact, he attended and was a participant to some extent in the Congress of Vienna at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, which was quite an interesting thing, and was involved in the repatriation of looted German artifacts following the Napoleonic Wars, artifacts that Napoleon's army had taken. Anyway, so there's this, yeah, going back to Documenta, there is this idea that it is this kind of this blind faith in the grand church of contemporary art that that us as art goers should subscribe to in order to kind of defend its meaning and its worthwhile. Its worthwhileness, is that such a word? Its worth. That we need to defend its value to the non-art going, the Philistine non-art going public. It was actually interesting going there with my wife Loretta, who is a corporate trainer and is not in any way an art person, which is one of the really great things about it. And to hear her response to things and to see what she was reacting to, which I have to say in many respects were the same things I was responding to, even with my additional kind of knowledge of art history and theory. One of the things that I suppose not having like a grand statement, a grand visual statement did, you know, something like Puppy in 1992 or something like that, what that didn't do was to kind of give something that allowed engagement, and that again reinforced that idea that, you know, we have sort of attendants of this kind of temple of art, that we're just actually there to receive. There is very little engagement. There were some works which were kind of that relational aesthetics kind of approach, which for instance the work which was about the political protest songs, you could go in there was a jukebox, you could press the number of a song. I pressed to listen to Which Side Are You On by Billy Bragg. Lyrics of that song as well as the other songs were on the wall. I pressed the Billy Bragg song because, you know, he's an old favourite of mine, old lefty British guitarist, singer kind of guy, very political, left-wing kind of political singer, and that was quite interactive. That piece was quite interactive because you could listen to the songs, you could look them up in the books that were available there, and you could also choose them on the jukebox, which was pretty cool. I mean, it looked great, it looked really good, which is kind of important, I think, as well, that these things really should actually look good and drag you in. This idea of art being something boring and austere, I think it's something that we need to fight against. So I suppose, in summary, I'm glad that I'm really glad that I did go to Documenta 13 and spent a couple of days in Kassel. I'm less glad about the fact that I got, which is nothing to do with the curatorial decisions or the town or anything, but I'm very disappointed by the fact I got pissed on for 2 days by, you know, European summer rain. It was cold. It was like the middle of a winter in Newcastle or Sydney. But it was interesting to go see because it is one of those things that people often will refer to. It was interesting to see. I bought the Part 3 guidebook, which was essentially 2 pages per participating artist, and gave you interesting, in German and in English, interesting, fairly succinct interpretive information about each of the works, enough to be able to flick through quite easily while you're going through the exhibition. I really think having that interpretive information there is absolutely vital when looking at contemporary art. A lot of people might disagree, but it doesn't speak for itself. It needs context. It really needs, a lot of contemporary art needs context to be understood. So I thought that was great, but I thought one of the other kind of wanks of the whole thing was the book of books that was part one of the catalogue. That was literally this thick, big thick tome. I don't know, I never actually saw a price written on any of them, which made me slightly suspicious. You know that thing about, you know, if you go into a shop and you don't see prices on things, you know, don't buy it. It's going to be twice as much as what you thought. But anyway, that particular book, this big thick tome, is available in German and also in English, and it gave very much kind of gave. To be fair, I didn't read any of the essays in it because I didn't buy it because it was too big and there's no price on it. But it very much gave the impression that this was something that was profoundly important that was being done here in this, you know, once every 5 years, this 100 days every 5 year kind of exhibition. You know, is it that important? Is contemporary art that important? Is it, you know, can you really make any singular important statements, any coherent statements really, in what is essentially this monolithic and yet fragmented exhibition that is held there? Different curators in the past have had different sort of approaches, but I think that this is a common thing that to documenters and to the various biennales that happen, and triennials, etc. That, you know, I think there is a sense of a lack of clarity of the purpose. And I think that when you move towards a clarity of the purpose, then the problem becomes making an overly simplified statement of what is meant to be a survey exhibition of contemporary art. So, on that particular note, those are my thoughts about Documenta 13 in Kassel, Germany at this particular time. On the 27th, wrong. On the 22nd of June 2012, and with that I will leave you with beer and Berlin. Thank you. I'll order another one. If I can find the guy. Come on. Hello? Hi. Thank you. What's up? Success.